Welcome to Winning Wednesdays with Pear VC. At Pear, we've been fueling the next generation of tech startups for 10 years. Working closely with founders since the beginning of their journeys, we've seen again and again that a good product isn't enough to build a meaningful business. You must also have a winning strategy and go-to-market. We believe that leveraging community, learning from one another, is key to establishing the right winning mindset, frameworks, and strategies. Enter Winning Wednesdays with Pear VC, a bi-weekly 45-minute webinar series on go-to-market topics that provides actionable insights to founders and teams building from 0 to 1. Our webinars are broken up into 2 parts. Part 1 is 20 to 25 minutes of presentation from a guest with go-to-market expertise, and Part 2 is a lively Q&A. We're your hosts, Pear go-to-market team, Pepe and Anna. Today, we're thrilled to have Jason Ferguson from ServiceTitan with us. Jason has more than a decade of tech sales experience at places like Verizon, Cisco, Bitium, and now ServiceTitan, where he's currently Senior Manager of Mid-Market Sales. Throughout his decorated career, he's focused on helping organizations develop their teams by shifting the way they think. Jason and I were colleagues at ServiceTitan, and I can say with confidence that he's one of my favorite people that I've ever worked with. And like I said earlier, he is someone who I literally feel like I'm different from having just worked with him and collaborated with him. His energy is infectious, and he's the embodiment of a winning recipe for success and go-to-market. He's who you want on your team, who you want managing your team. He's amazing. He was always motivating and calling everyone higher. And so today it's no surprise that he's a TEDx speaker, a mental conditioning coach, an in-demand keynote speaker, and we're so lucky to have him talk with us today about a topic that's critical to unlocking ultimate success. So we invite you to turn on your cameras and engage with reactions as Jason shares his presentation. And after his remarks, please participate actively in the Q&A. Without further ado, Jason, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here with us.
Man, first and foremost, I'm super excited that you thought of me and grateful to be tapped in for opportunities like this. I don't take any of these for granted. So thank you, first and foremost. And secondly, guys, this is more of a family conversation. This, like the term like webinar and like keynote, it's like, nah, man, this is a family conversation on like what I've seen in my experience as a Division I athlete and now as a leader in sales, what a winning mindset looks like, right? So let me share my screen and we'll get into the goods. Anna, 25 minutes. I'm like, I could talk, girl. Like 25 minutes.
We'll just say that's a softball park goal.
I mean, come on, man. Nah, I got you. We'll get it in. So like she said, just quick recap, senior leader today at ServiceTitan, number 5 on the Forbes 100. Had to throw that out because, I was employee number 187 and I take a lot of pride in being a leader there and help, strategize on process and talent and all the things. I'm a speaker, success coach, and previous athlete. And again, thrilled to share some of my insights today. Now, when it comes to sales mindset, a lot of people like to start off with the question, like, what do I get them to do, right? Like they think it's about process, but when it comes to the top sellers on the planet, it doesn't start with what they do. It starts with what they think. It starts with what's going on up here. That is the foundation, the catalyst of their success. Now, I like to call these things mental conditioning gems, right? So we'll hop right into gem number 1. I call this pathological optimism. Now, some of you may or may not have heard the term, right? Pathological optimism, but I had an extreme aha moment coming to face with the reality that I'm a pathological optimist, straight up, right? Now, my background is heavily inundated with sports. I am an athlete junkie, right? In high school, I was one of the top running backs and wide receivers in California. I know you guys can't see me right now, but I'm 5'5", 175 pounds right now. But in high school, I was like 5'3", $135. I was tiny. So while I was killing on the football field, all of these schools were like, yo, you're so little. Like, they weren't offering me a scholarship. A lot of them were like, hey, I want to see what you could do in person. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to these camps and absolutely destroy these defenders, right? So that's what I did. I go to like Nike camp, I kill it. Go to USC camp, I kill it. And now UCLA is like, hey, we want to offer you a scholarship. And I'm like, what, UCLA, right? Like I get to stay in LA around my family. Like this is a no-brainer. So I go to UCLA camp and it's the same thing. I'm killing. And now it's the last play of the camp, okay? And I had like this favorite route that I would run because it was unguardable. So I set up to run the route. Quarterback says hike, run full speed, stick my foot in the ground, boom, I tear my ACL. And as you can imagine, right, 5'3", 135 pounds with a blown out knee, and now I'm gonna miss my senior season of high school. Nobody wants me. So I went from being this heavily recruited athlete, right, the talk of this, the star of campus, to virtually non-existent. But something in me kept saying like, yo, like all I need is one shot. So my senior year comes and goes, but I'm still obsessing over the idea like, all I need is one opportunity. Somebody's going to take a chance. And now it's 2 weeks before signing day. And when you're a potential college athlete, there's a deadline on like when you can sign your letter of intent. So I'm sitting in my coach's office 2 weeks before signing day, and I'm just sitting there. It's a free period. And in walks the head coach from the University of Hawaii. And as it turns out, he was there to recruit my best friend. And my best friend was outside talking to Fresno State at that exact moment. So here's this coach in here to talk to my teammate. He's standing in the corner and he's waiting to speak to my teammate. And my voice, the voice in my head is like, man, go talk to him. And then I start having that internal conversation like, well, what do I say? And eventually I'm like, yo, I got to go talk to this guy. So I get up, I introduce myself, and then I point to the TV in the corner. My highlight tape, and this is dating myself, right? This is back when like highlight tapes were on VCRs, right? They weren't online. So I'm like, yo, my highlight tape is on top of the VCR. Do you have 2 minutes? And he's like, yeah, I have 2 minutes. He pops in my tape, watches it for 30 seconds, and then offers me a scholarship on the spot. And I remember walking, I still get emotional telling this story, dude. I remember walking out of the room and like calling my mom and being like, you'll never believe what happened. Like, yo, I'm going to Hawaii. Like, it's lit. Like, let's go, right? It's crazy. And a lot of people think like, oh man, you got really lucky. And like, yeah, I got lucky, but I also feel like I created that luck. I was so convinced that something was going to happen. I was so connected with opportunities around me that I didn't miss my moment. Like, what if I would have been bitter or jealous when that coach walked in to recruit my teammate? That opportunity would have came and went. I wouldn't have even recognized it. I wouldn't have saw it, right? So I feel like the best, strongest minded, the best sellers in the world combat adversities and challenges with pathological optimism. But like, what does this look like in sales, right? Like if you're a seller, how does pathological optimism then translate to you as a seller? The top sellers that are pathologically optimistic expect the next deal to be the best deal. They expect the next owner that hops on that call to be the best, most, you know what I mean, most inviting personality ever. They truly believe that if there's 1 day left in the month, they got this. If there's one opportunity left in the final hour, they got this, right? So they go hand in hand. And I think fortunately enough, I've had experience to see like the fruition of that mindset, both in me and outside of me. And it's something that I harp on. I did my TEDx on pathological optimism and the windows of opportunity. Now, how can you be more optimistic, right? For one, metacognition. It's just a real fancy way of saying, right? It's the practice of thinking about your thinking. The human brain has 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. 80% of those thoughts are negative. 95% of those thoughts are repetitive. Like you have to be intentional about thinking about your thinking, right? Now, I mean, for me, it was journaling, right? And I used to set an alarm clock at lunchtime and at the end of the day, because like, just like a lot of you on this call, like I've been through shit. I've been through adversities, right? I knew that the software that I was running on was toxic. So I was intentional about thinking about my thinking. Second piece here is gratitude. Like I know in social media today, it's like a hot topic, right? Everybody's talking about be grateful. And like I subscribe to that. Like when you practice gratitude, you shift the neuroplasticity in your brain. The neuroplasticity is basically your brain's ability to adapt and change. So if you focus on what you're grateful for, you'll naturally become more positive, more optimistic, focusing on the things you have and things rather than focus on the things you don't have. Now, lastly, when it comes to helping salespeople be more optimistic, right? Attack each opportunity, each call with the right mindset. One of the things I preach is intentional ignorance. This might be a new one for you guys, but intentional ignorance, what does that mean? So one day, so my brother works with me, by the way, right? I love working with my big bro. And I was a manager at the time. He's a sales rep. And one day we're all in our Friday huddle and our CRO was in there. And he starts the conversation by asking my brother, like, hey, man, you're closing a lot of cold outbound opportunities. Now, for those of you in sales, right, like marketing leads are way easier than cold leads, right? Like, it's just the way it goes. Like, if they're coming to you, you'll probably have a better chance of closing them rather than us going to source the opportunity. So he wanted to know how my brother's close rate in the cold channel was so strong. And my brother said, about 4 months ago, I stopped looking at where the leads were coming from. He said, it was messing with my mindset. It was messing with my approach to the deal and my ability to go into that call with the right mindset that I just stopped looking. So now he's attacking every call with the right intentionality, the right mindset. He's actually given himself a chance to show up energized and expecting the outcome and the results that he knows he's capable of. Intentional ignorance, super fire. Now, like, I wouldn't preach to your team to like stop looking at all of the notes all the time, right? But like in some instances, there's a tremendous amount of value there so you could show up the way that you need to show up to be successful. All right, that's gym number one. Gym number two, authenticity. I learned this the hard way. So I basically like finessed my way into Cisco systems. Like how I got into Cisco, first of all, I was selling phones out of a kiosk at Verizon. So Cisco had like no business hiring me, but the hiring manager was like, yo, I see something new. They're having a mixer tonight, right? This was in San Francisco. Just show up to the mixer and be yourself. Be that charismatic, enthusiastic person. Dude, like you'll have a shot, right? So I show up to the mixer and I'm being myself, right? I only had like one drink, so I made sure I wasn't too crazy because I'm already crazy. You know what I mean? I'm already turned up to the max. And I, at the end of the mixer, I wind up winning over the VP and the director. And they're like, you know what, dude, we're going to give you a shot. So I start my career off at Cisco and I am bombing. Like it's the first time I had to cold call. It's the first time I had to figure out how to cold call and like run demos. And like, for the first 2 months, I'm stressed out. I'm like, yo, I'm not going to have a job in a month. So I decided to hit up one of my best friends and mentors, who's actually the author of this amazing book, The Unsold Mindset. That's not a shameless plug. I did not write the book, but it's a phenomenal mindset sales book, by the way. And he just so happens to be one of my best friends. So I call up my boy Cock and I'm like, Cock, like, dude, I'm not going to have a job in a month, right? Like, what do I do? And he's like, okay. So he starts walking me through sales process stuff. And I'm like, okay, sales process, cool. And like, I feel like it's a great conversation. It's exactly what I need to hear. But at the end of the call, he goes, everything that I said about process is great. But if you remember one thing from this conversation, you need to be authentic. He said, dude, like you need to be you. Like they hired you from the mixer because you were you. But like, if you're not showing up as your authentic self, like you're missing the opportunity to tap into your superpower, right? So I sit with that, like, of course I'm being authentic. Like, what is he talking about? But as I reflect on this like 2.5 hour BART ride back to Brentwood from San Francisco, right? I had nothing but time. I hang up and I'm a little tight because I feel like he might be trying to call me out, right? But I sit with it and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not being authentic. Like the more I thought about it, I was like, yo, I'm trying to sound like the guy next to me, like who was like a 40-year-old and like, listen, I'm part white, so this isn't me being derogatory, right? But like, he was like this 40-year-old white dude who sounded nothing like me. Like, can you imagine trying to sound like anybody but me? Like, I also realized I was trying to like mask my urban accent. So I probably sounded even crazier. And I'm like, yo, if I'm going to go out and not last another month, I need to be true to who I am. I need to be the energy driven dude. I need to be enthusiastic. I need to be quick witted and allow myself to be, right, what I know I could be. And I think what transpired from that, like me owning my authenticity, like before I knew it, I was the #1 seller in the entire building. right? And I got promoted like team lead, and I was well on my way to being a manager at Cisco Systems. And the beauty about authenticity is like, if you have the courage to show up raw and imperfect, which is basically what I was describing in myself, you give yourself a chance to be the best seller in the room, right? Now you have a superpower. And the next piece there is, right, it's like, if there's a personality trait that's authentic to you, that essentially could be your selling strength, right? I was reading Naval's book, right? Like we all know Naval, I forget his last name, super successful investor, tech guy. And he dropped the bar in his book. He said, the way you defeat competition is by being authentic, because you're one of one. You're one of one. Like you're competing, but like if you're super authentic, like you're a one-on-one, man, you already got a leg up. Let's go. So to me, right, when I think about successful human beings and successful sellers, because they mirror each other, right? Like a successful life mindset is a successful sales mindset. Authenticity is at the core of that. Like I think of Marshawn Lynch. Do we know who Marshawn Lynch is? Maybe the running back for the old running back for the Seattle Seahawks. Hilarious dude. The world loves him because he's so authentic. And if you haven't checked him out, like just YouTube him. He's hilarious. Check him out. But he's probably the most authentic person I've ever seen. And the world loves him. All right, let's keep this thing going. Oh no, best part. How? Almost slipped up on this. How do we become more authentic? I think vulnerability is at the core of like the first step. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. Allow yourself to shed that mask that we've been trained to put on when we leave that front door to go to work, or to go be that parent, or to go be that support, like whatever it is, shed that mask, be vulnerable, and you'll put yourself in a position to be more authentic. I can't believe I almost forgot that, man. That was the juice. All right. Gym number 3, man, competition. Like, let's go. Competition. Like, we got to compete. We got to compete. Like, I think, like, when I think of the word competition today, like, for some reason, I feel like it comes off a little bit like it's been, like, demonized. Like, people are afraid to compete. I almost feel like it's switched up a bit to where it's like people are like, no, like, I just compete with myself, which is true. Like, you are competing with yourself, right? You're competing with your discipline and your consistency and your habits. But I think externally, we got to embrace competition. And what I've learned about competition as an athlete and a seller is a talent extracts a talent. Like when you're competing against another dog, like another like hitter, like somebody who's just got the juice, and you've embraced that competition, they're going to pull something out of you that you may not even known was there. But if you shy away from that competition and you give yourself an out by saying, oh, I'm only competing with myself, you've already lost an opportunity to create a valuable edge. Does that make sense? Now, like my first experience with like true competition. So like, right, I get that scholarship, right? So now I'm headed to the University of Hawaii and it's popping. Like, I can't believe it. And I get there in my freshman year, I started as a kick returner. I don't know if you guys follow football, but like kick returners, they kick the ball off and there's a guy who catches it and runs it back. That's what I did my whole freshman year. And I did really well. Like won special teams player of the week a couple times. Like, dude, I was setting myself up to be the guy my sophomore year. So my sophomore year in college comes, and here I am in my mind, I'm about to be the guy. I'm on the ticket stubs, like the advertiser. It's my 5'5", like holding the ball, right? Like I have like this red carpet rolled out for me. And then there's this new kid who shows up who was like highly acclaimed, highly recruited. He was like being blown up. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to be on this side and he's going to be on this side. We're going to play together. And my coach had other plans. He literally puts this dude who's also supposed to be the guy right behind me. So now I'm freaking out. I'm like, man, I thought I was going to be the guy. And here is Devon Best, who wound up playing 6 years in the NFL, by the way. He started for the Dolphins. Here's this, once in a 2-decade talent right behind me trying to take my spot. And instead of running, I embraced the competition. Like that camp, I wound up doing stuff that my 5'5", I had no clue my 5'5" frame could do. Like it pulled something out of me because I was willing to go there. And like, flip side of this, like we wound up becoming best friends and we pushed each other. So there was a dynamic of camaraderie that was phenomenal as well, but it pulled that piece out of me that like I needed. And then the beauty is before the first game of the season against USC, we started together. So us challenging and competing day in and day out, coach said, okay, I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. I'm going to let both these guys loose together. And it was an amazing day. Now, how does this translate into sales, right? Like I have a great story. So two of my top sellers, one's by the name of Doug, another's by the name of Brandon. I said branding, geez, Louise, don't judge my day. So I have two hitters. Doug is a two-time AE of the year, okay? So he's won it twice in the 4 years that he's been here. He's like amazing. He's a hitter. Last year, Brandon, who's another amazing sales rep, was basically killing all year. Like he was making his run for AE of the year and he was solidifying it. Like he was creating a large gap. So at the end of the year, Brandon closes this like monstrous deal to close out the quarter. And like he passes Doug up in like the last 2 days of the month. And Doug calls me laughing. He's like, oh my God, like, did you see that deal that Brandon closed? And I'm like, yeah, like, what are we going to do about it? And he's like, man, like, what can I do about it? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, we got to figure it out. So the next morning, Doug calls me from the road and he's like, hey, can I expense breakfast? I'm like, for who? He's like, remember that shop that I thought I was going to close 3 months ago? They've been avoiding me. I'm pulling up. I'm pulling up to their shop, dude. I'm pulling up. And I'm like, yeah, like, let's go, right? So he pulls up. He's got breakfast in hand. And while he didn't close or earn the partnership that day, we wound up winning the business, earning the partnership the next month. Doug doesn't do that if Brandon doesn't close that monstrous deal and if Doug doesn't embrace the competition. And I think there's a fine line, right, of driving that competitive spirit internally within your teams. For me, like one of my mantras is like, we don't want to be successful at the expense of anybody failing. So I've created and kind of cultivated that type of culture. But I pour into my dogs. Like I want my hitters on go. Like we got to go. We got to figure it out. And that type of competition just makes everybody better. Now, what I've seen from a founder standpoint, like when you're a founder or a leader in your org, you set the tone. You set the tone, you drive that competition. Like I'm obviously a competitive guy as is, but like I'm willing to try to tap into another gear because our founders set the tone. BOOBA means be obsessed or be average. Our founders are obsessed with serving their customers. Like every opportunity they get in every company-wide all hands, they use the word obsessed. They're obsessed with serving their customers. They're obsessed with being innovative. They're obsessed with the idea that there is a marketplace, right, that they're contributing to where they're being competed against, right? Other companies that we're competing against are being innovative. So we don't tuck tail. We come back to the drawing board and we innovate. And then I train my team, right, on how to leverage that innovation as value. But, be obsessed or be average. It comes from our founders. It's top down. Like when you get a hold of a personality like me and I see my founders are like willing to go there and they're competitive and they're obsessed and they take care of their people and they really want to serve the space that they're in. Oh man, like it's infectious. So remember as leaders, it's top down, that competitive spirit and drive, that obsessiveness to be great starts and ends with you. Oh, next gem. This might be the last one, if I'm not mistaken. Extreme ownership. Like, think about that. Extreme ownership. So, right, we talked about vulnerability a second ago. I'm going to be vulnerable and honest with you guys. So that USC game, right, where I was now a starter and Devon was now a starter, I tore my ACL again in the first play of that game. And like, couldn't believe it. I'm like, I'm finally here. I'm a starter now, tear my ACL. And long story short, I went through a massive identity crisis. Like my entire upbringing, I was an athlete first, right? And because I subscribed to that as my identity, when that got snatched away from me, I was completely lost. And I wound up being an addict. I was addicted to oxys for years and years, to the point where it almost killed me. And again, full transparency, I'm going through withdrawals one night. I'm sleeping on my brother's couch because I was kicked out of my house, okay? And I was so sick. Like the only thing I could think of was robbing a pharmacy down the street. I knew where my brother kept his gun. So I go to my brother's closet, I grab his gun, I put it on the coffee table, and I'm like, oh my God, how am I gonna come up with this game plan? And like, I am seconds away from going to do the impossible, right? Crazy, out of my mind. And my mom calls me. And my mom plants this seed of me, going to rehab and getting my life together. And what really came to mind the most in that conversation, when I put the gun back on the coffee table and thought about the words that my mom was sharing with me, I had turned into a victim. I was so upset that the coaches stopped caring, stopped calling, weren't checking in. I was so upset that Devon got to go live out his dreams in the NFL. I was so lost. I had turned into a victim. I needed to take extreme ownership of my life. I needed to be extremely accountable of the actions, decisions, and the thoughts that I allowed to consume my brain, right? So I can move forward and be the future version of myself that I knew I was capable of being. Right? This goes hand in hand with sales. It's so easy to place blame on everybody else. The leads are weak, right? Like marketing's not doing their job. Cold outbound ops are trash this month. Like, oh, leadership changed pricing structure. There's 1,000,000,001 reasons to give yourself an out to be a victim. We need to combat that with extreme ownership. And while I had to learn that the hard way, it was one of the best things I can go through, because it really shifted the way, one, that I knew I was capable of thinking now, right? Like I learned real quick I was capable of being a victim. So now I knew I needed to combat that, right? Like I needed to push that away, refute that to the best of my ability. Now, what does this look like as a sales leader, right? My CRO, I brag about him all the time. Like, dude, I am so blessed to be able to work with my CRO, whose name is Ross Beastman. And what makes Ross unique is why ServiceTitan is a $9 or $10 billion company. I have access to Ross as our CRO. My reps have access to Ross as our CRO, right? And I want to say it was maybe 5 or 6 months ago, we're closing out the quarter again, and we were banking on like one of those mega whales, right? A whale is like a massive deal that just changes the trajectory of your quarter. And I get an email from this customer basically saying like, hey, after speaking to somebody at a trade show, like he didn't get great feedback. He decided that he was going to hold off. So I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is going to kill our quarter. We need this partnership. So I call Ross. And I'm just trying to brainstorm with Ross. And I hardly call Ross. Like, I don't, if you have that clip to use, like you can't abuse the CRO clip, right? So I'm like, okay, I need to use this clip. And Ross, we talk about it for 5 minutes. He hangs up the phone. Unbeknownst to me, he heads to the airport, okay? He catches literally like a red-eye flight. The flight gets canceled. He sleeps on the floor at the airport. Overnight, wakes up, flies down to Philly. And this guy, like the customer, Philly personality, like hardcore, no nonsense. Like he was, a savage. Ross didn't care. Boom, gets there. Meets with the guy in person, right? Speaks through the challenges, the pains, the concerns, all the things that may have, halted the partnership from blooming forward, right? Ross flies back the same day. The next day, we earn the business. That's extreme ownership, right? Like as a leader, if my CRO is willing to go to that length to set the tone that high, what do you think that does to us as a team? There are no excuses. Like Ross could have easily been like, man, like, blamed it on, our onboarding team, support, the success team, right? All these different teams that may or may not have dropped the ball, right? I don't know. But instead, Ross focused on the things that he can control. I'm not going to focus on the uncontrollables, right? What are my controllables right now, today? And this crazy guy says the only thing I can control is getting my ass on a flight right now to go make this right. And we earn the partnership. And I think for me, like, not only was I super grateful to earn the business, right, and get us the goal, but he helped me shift my thinking as a leader that, like, I need to double down on my controllables. There's always something I can do, whether we win or we don't win. I can execute all my controllables and take extreme ownership. Now, to close out, one of my mantras from going through the adversities that I've been through in life, and we all have a story, right? I shared part of my story with you guys today. Everybody has a story, but my experience has led me to this mantra of entitled to nothing, grateful for everything. Like, what I've seen as an athlete, what I've seen in life, and what I've seen as now a senior leader in sales, entitlement is a dream killer. Entitlement is a career killer. Entitlement, which you saw in my story, right? I was entitled to all these things that couldn't come to me now because I tore my ACL. I almost died because of it. Entitlement can kill you. And what I learned was gratitude can get you through the most challenging, difficult times in your life, right? It's gratitude. Like, when I think about what happened recently, like, there are people in my company, getting promoted to VP, and I felt that entitlement creeping up. Like, man, I've been here 7 years. Like, I should have been a VP. Like, I'm killing it. Our numbers are crazy. I had to suppress that. And to not only be grateful, but to take a second and zoom out. Like, I don't know about everybody on this call right now, but a lot of us used to wish, pray, beg for the life and the position that we have right now. And if you're entitled, you'll lose sight of all of that. So I needed to take a second and zoom out. And I looked at my wife and said, man, life is great, bro. Life is great. Like, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was a junkie, like, out of my mind, like, I begged for where I am now. And entitlement can strip you from all of that. So I urge you guys, less entitlement, more gratitude, because success isn't given, it's earned. And that's my time. That's all I got. That is all I got. I would love to field questions, comments. What do you guys got for me? Let's get it.
I hope you can all see now a taste of how incredible it is to be around Jason, to work with Jason is just, yeah, it's this. I feel like I want to go, like, I don't know, do something big, right? Like, take over the world. It's that type of energy that really makes you feel, yeah, like the world is yours. So thank you, Jason. That was phenomenal. And yes, we have questions for you. I have some questions that were pre-submitted, but I welcome questions live, like Jason said. So please jump in, folks. I'll start with a few that were submitted beforehand. And I think one that's top of mind always for our founders, Jason, is hiring and finding people like you, right? You mentioned you were really a gem that they uncovered, right, when you joined Cisco. What do you look for when you're hiring people that are coming in with that mindset? I know you especially are someone who is happy to coach people to get that mindset, but how do we find people like you for our organizations? How do we find people like you for our teams?
Yep, great question. So obviously, in order to make it even to a conversation with somebody like myself internally at ServiceTitan, like, your experience on paper has to be somewhat relevant, but, like, it's not even the relevance and experience for me. It's literally everything that has to do with what's going on up here, and are they coachable? What have they failed in previously? What do their failures look like, and how do they respond to that? How competitive are they, and are they willing to be coached and go above and beyond the call of, like, what's average? Like, you guys saw my mantra, BOOBA, be obsessed or be average. So I rarely ask anything that has to do with sales process. Like if they made it to me, right, they've experienced process, and I'm going to train them and coach them on process. I listen to call reviews every week, right? Like I've call reviewed out. I got like 3 to do today, right? Like they're going to get the coaching, but the sweet spot is asking the question to gauge their competency, their drive, their coachability, and how they respond to failure. Because I don't care how good you are, if you're in sales, you're going to go through it. Like you're going to experience tough months, right? You're going to experience the shift that comes with time in seat. We've all gone through it. Anna, myself, there's other sellers, like we've all went through it. So how do they respond to failure? What does that look like? So all of my stuff for me and my team is typically predicated around unpacking that mind and are they coachable?
That's awesome. Thanks, Jason. We have a question from Amy. Oh, Amy. Oh, there. Can you hear Amy?
I can't hear her. Amy, I think you're muted.
No.
Amy.
I know.
The next person.
Oh no, there you go.
Now,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Something was up with my AirPods. First of all, great presentation. I felt like I was at like both a pep talk and like a storytelling time. It was really great and entertaining. I guess so. I also have had multiple knee surgeries, one being a torn ACL, and from my personal experience, like I'm very optimistic when I'm like how you coach your teams with this idea of pathological optimism. How do you maintain a sense of like it not becoming blind optimism to where they're like kind of blowing past the signals and maybe like dismissing problems?
No, phenomenal question. I call that toxic positivity, right? Like how basically you're saying like, how do you refrain from being like toxic positive, right? Because then there's no buy-in. And I think one is being honest. Like I don't avoid the tough conversations. Like we have them. I actually confront them. And I think by me confronting them and like acknowledging that the shift in culture or the shift in processes are tough and like confronting that stuff head on, it earns equity in my relationships. I just don't allow myself or my team to dwell on it. Like we acknowledge it. We meet every Wednesday as a team. We get it out, right? We talk about it. And then I expect them to shift their thinking as now problem solvers and doers and not toxic to the culture of like victimhood. So I think long story short, right? You acknowledge, you discuss, you be real, you be vulnerable, but you don't sit there too long. You pivot out. And I think they'll adopt that, right? Like my team will say stuff now like, okay, Ferg, like I'm frustrated, I'm but I'm not trying to complain. I'm not trying to complain. I'm ready to move on. And that shows me that like, hey, I've earned equity to where they'll be honest with me, but they know like what's coming next is, okay, like how do we own it now? Because the results aren't gonna, score themselves. Like we got to go get it. And I hope that's helpful. And I hope that answers the question. Great question.
Yeah, thanks, Amy, for that question. Nash also has a question.
Yeah, I do. Awesome pitch. Not pitch, but presentation, Jason. Thoroughly like absorbed with every word. I've been taking a ton of notes here, so I wasn't like texting or emailing somebody. I was just like full screen and typing away. So that was really good. You talked about like being your authentic self, and those are words I've definitely heard before. I wonder like what was it that you think stood in your way of being your authentic self, and what was that process like of recognizing that, having the realization, and then stepping into what you now consider to be your authentic self?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. I'll tell you exactly what it is. We make up in our minds what we think these titles should be like. Like I made up in my mind what I thought the top sellers in the world should sound like, should look like. Like I literally created this fictional character of what it should be like, right? And like my acknowledgement to that was like, holy shit, the best people in every position are the exact opposite of what we think they are, right? They're not the most technically sound. They're not the most, you know what I mean? Like gregarious. They're not any of these things. They're the exact opposite. And like what my first thing was like, since I know what I'm doing is wrong, it doesn't feel natural. Let me start doing the exact opposite of that, right? And, like I had to reflect on what would be opposite of trying to sound like Josh, who was sitting next to me, and actually sounding like me. So we went through this process of shedding what I thought it should look like and not caring anymore. Like, can you, like I said it earlier, like I would mask my urban accent. Like I'm from West LA. Like I talk the way that I talk, and I may not even sound that urban to y'all, but in my mind, I sounded like this urban kid who like no CTO would want to talk to. And I couldn't be further from the truth. You know, and I was crazy. So it was acknowledging that like I needed to shed that character. And then it was also giving myself the space to be more self-aware of like who I actually am. And I think self-awareness could be cultivated with journaling, which I'm a big fan of. Like I'm telling you, I had 2 alarms that would go off, one at noon, one at the end of the day. Like, yo, how are you thinking? What's going on? Like, what's going, like, that's metacognition, right? And then I think the other thing that really helped me with perspective is reading. Dude, I read 2 to 3 books a month. And like the best part about reading is I'm not just consuming everybody's information blindly. I get to figure out the shit that I disagree with. Like I'll read something and be like, oh my God, that was fire, right? But then I'll read something else and be like, I don't subscribe to that. Like, I don't believe in that. And the more those moments present itself, the more I kind of figure out like what I actually believe in, like what I actually stand on. And I think I've just learned to trust my intuition, good, bad, or ugly. Like this is just what it is. You know what I mean?
I love this point, Jason. Thank you. And great question, Nash. I think this is one of the things that's most counterintuitive for people, especially starting out in sales and founders, because a lot of people just want a playbook. Like, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to say. Just show me. And it's every market, every founder is going to find their own way, right? And so it's about finding and following that intuition and honing, using best practices, but also not, forcing something, that's not, yours and authentic. And I just love this point so much, Jason.
And the last thing I'll say with that, like, that's how you cultivate confidence too. Like when you start trusting your gut, and like, yeah, you'll get some fails and it's gonna suck. But when you start seeing wins, dude, you're gonna be like, I'm the guy. Like, I'm the man out here, right? And you start to trust your instincts and your authenticity even more. And I call that win stacking. Like once I started being authentic to myself and started like stacking wins, it fueled me to double down on what felt right. And I put it on the screen as well. Be vulnerable, man. Be vulnerable. Shed that mask, dude. Like when you leave your house in the morning, like don't put on the mask of what you think people think you should be. Man, I want to see that Nash mask. Good looking dude, right? You need to leave your spot looking like Nash, bro.
I love that. I know we're at time. We were going to do a couple more questions. Nicholas has a question, and then I have a final question. We'll wrap up. This is just so good. So I hope we can.
I got time. I blocked out the hour. So.
Okay. Nicholas.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate you sharing your story, and feels very motivating to listen to you. Can you talk a little more about pathological optimism and maybe any daily practices that you have been putting into place to build that muscle? And you mentioned the journal twice a day. You mentioned a few things, but I just wanted to ask again if you have any daily practices to help build that.
Absolutely. So I mentioned it a second ago, like journaling, I think is huge, but I also can't undermine the value in reading. Like, check it out. This is how powerful reading can be for your mindset and like driving that optimistic nature. During COVID, I went to eat with one of my buddies, who's an avid reader as well. And I'm talking about all the challenges internally at ServiceTitan. I'm like, man, like it's killing me. And he hears me out. And he looks at me and he goes, you haven't been in the gym, have you? And like, I kind of looked at him like, bro, I've been in the gym. Like, bro, you haven't been in the gym. Like, what you mean? Right. And I'm like, are you crazy? Like, I biked here. You know what I mean? I've been in the gym, bro. And he's like, no, he calls me Philly. He's like, no, Philly, like you haven't been in the mental gym. Like, when's the last time you read a book, bro? And ever since he said that, I was like, oh my, like I can literally tell when somebody doesn't work on personal development. Like it reeks off them, right? So I tell that story to say, you know, I don't think there's a whole lot to it. Like, be mindful of your thinking, fuel your brain, like what you put in front of your eyes and what you put between your ears. It needs to be your mental gym. It needs to fuel your spirit. People talk a lot of crap about, oh, you read 3 books a month. You don't retain all that. So I'm keeping my brain primed. Like, you're right, I don't retain all of that. But like, I'm priming myself for the day. Like, for me, it was life or death, right? For me, success is my duty, right? Like, I have to be successful. Like, I want it that bad. So I'm very mindful of what I put between my ears to prime myself to stay optimistic, to not be perfect, but to go for progress, etc. So like, I know that may not be another step that you can take, but like, I would double down on just recognizing your thoughts and be very, very mindful of what you're putting between your ears and in front of your eyes, because it drive your spirit. And that's how you recalibrate the software that you're running on. We're all running on some sort of software, right? Like, cultivated by our parents, or what the girl said to me in the 8th grade, right? About being short. Like, it's all this collection of things, right? That we're running on. How do you combat that? The good book and like being mindful of your thinking.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I love that. Okay, we have one more from Michael, and then I'll be last, but I want to let Michael chime in. Thanks, Michael, for joining from the road. Please ask your
Hey,
question.
can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Sir.
I'm on the 210, about half an hour east of the ServiceTitan building. I'm a big fan of ServiceTitan, and after that talk, I'm a big fan of you, Jason.
Thank you.
One of the questions that I have is, ServiceTitan, you guys serve the trades, and so we're talking HVAC, plumbing, and I imagine there's huge diversity there in the customer base, right? Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, everyone in between. And I find myself as an early stage founder, our business, we're kind of early stage ServiceTitan for trucking. And I find myself mirroring a lot on the topic of authenticity, mirroring talk styles, mirroring tones, kind of speaking their language. And it works, but I don't feel very authentic a lot of times doing it. And so I'd love for you to reflect on that a little bit. And then quick kind of 2-part question. The second part of my question is, I don't know if you do this sort of thing for early stage companies, but I'd love to invite you to speak to our team. We've got, a 30-person kind of, we're at a few million of ARR, 30-person team, 4 AEs, 4 SDRs. If you're willing to do another one of these, we'd gladly have you talk to Toro. So sorry for the long-winded question, but.
No, first of all, absolutely. Like, I keynote speak. I probably do like 3 or 4 of those type of things a month. And it's my passion. Like, I went through what I went through so I can do this and, help bring other people along, extract greatness. Right. So love that. Thank you. I'm totally down. Second thing is, I think when you think about sales skills, right, and like what's in sales books as like a best practice, mirroring is a thing. And I think there's a time and place to absolutely mirror. I think like the vertical, right? The customer, who you're speaking to in the moment. What I learned to do, and this is what worked for me, is I mirror tonality. I don't mirror talk style, because I can't be my best self if I'm trying to talk like you and mask the things that give me that edge, right? Which is like, you guys see, like, my energy is crazy. Like, can you imagine me trying to be anything but this? And like, that's what I was doing. So like, my mirroring would be predicated to like tonality and energy, because I know this much energy could really like, like be off-putting for somebody who's just not with it. And it's a sales call and not a call like this, like a webinar. So like, I would say there's a time and place for all of it. Mirroring tonality is absolutely something that you can think of, but I want to encourage you to be authentic to you. Like when you can tap into that version on any call with anybody in life and in sales, like that's where you're really going to win. Because like you can be that person forever. You can be you forever.
I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, I as a fellow person of color in an industry that doesn't have, frankly, a lot of people that look like me,
Yeah.
it's definitely been a topic that's top of mind for how do I show up as an authentic service provider to this industry? How do I show up as an authentic leader for my teams? Right? If I've got one of our customer success people that are on this trip visiting customers, and sometimes I wonder, hey, am I coming across as the same person internally in smaller, larger group conversations versus with the customer? So that's really good advice.
Absolutely. And like what I would say, man, is like you don't accomplish that by like trying to create a personality based on who you're speaking to. You accomplish that by caring the most, by finding something about this customer that you can fall in love with, by really, really being the consultant that they need and not selling them, but educating them so you could really take their business to the next level. People respond to preparation and care and excitement far more than like what you look like or what you sound like. So I would say, like, bro, be the most prepared, the most hungry, care the most, really care about the outcomes and the results. And like the rest of this shit takes care of itself.
I love that. Love the question, Michael. And really resonates with me. Again, I was at ServiceTitan, and it very male dominated field, as you can imagine, also a person of color. And your question is just super top of mind, was top of mind for me when I was there. And one thing, it's funny, I was a mom. I had 2 young kids when I was at ServiceTitan, and I really leaned into being a parent, and most of the people that we were working with had children, or could relate to that part of me. And so bringing parts that again felt vulnerable, because it was like, oh, I'm a mom and I'm a woman, and can I talk about this? But really showing up that way, I think, unlocked a lot for me. So just I think finding those opportunities where there is overlap, right? And remembering, even though there are differences in all of us, we also share so much, right? The human experience is so universal, and there's always something that we can fall back on. So just love that question, Michael. Thank you.
And real quick, Mike, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I said that as part of my story. Like, dude, like I used to try not to sound too black, which is, I hate to say it like that because I know we're in a PC world, right? But like, it's a thing. So like, I'm glad that you connected with that, because like I went through that. You know what I mean? Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing. It is not an appropriate ending question for you, but specifically in the face of challenges, give us like the final takeaway. How do we keep that winning mindset when life just gets hard, when it's hard, when numbers aren't being hit, when everything feels like a challenge? What is your bottom line? This is how you stay positive.
Man, I said this earlier, but I'm telling you, it's like, for me, in the space that I'm in now, so ambitious. Like I want to take over the world, right? And like when I'm challenged, or like I'm hit with like these pockets of adversity, like it could feel like everything's crashing, like I suck, like all these things, right? And for me, the key has been to zoom out. Take a second and zoom out. Like, look how much you've accomplished. Look how much you've done. Like, dude, you're doing it. Like, you're doing it. Like, I remind myself all the time, like, dude, I'm doing it. Like, it's going to happen for me. Things are going to happen for me, like when the timing's right. And like, I truly believe in that. But like, aside from like the daily practices of like reading and all these things, I'm very mindful about zooming out and practicing gratitude, because the rest of the stuff is going to take care of itself. So like, I urge you guys, especially as early stage founders, leaders, like, dude, like, do you know how crazy that is? Like, that's crazy. Like, you guys are about to go on to build something massive, big, successful, change lives. Like, not everybody's doing that. I'm not doing that, right? Like, so give yourself a chance to pause and zoom out. You're doing it.
I love that. Perfect way to end this incredible webinar. Jason, you are unbelievable. I'm so grateful to have you in my life, to know you, to be inspired by you. Thank you. Everyone, please help me. I know not a physical round of applause. We're not together, but wow, amazing. Thank you, Jason.